Hello YouTube, it's me again, back with another video, and this one I am filming pretty late, so please do forgive me if I have the occasional inconsistency of speech. I'm really tired, but I'm trying to get as many voiceovers filmed as I possibly can, just so that I have enough content for the next couple of weeks at least. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. I had done an Instagram poll, and one of the, by far, most popular options was to reveal some Det characters to you guys. It seems you guys really love those stories, which blew me away, that everyone wanted to see them so much. But the longer I left the poll up, after I had already moved on to finalists, a lot of people said that they wanted to meet Jonathon Crane from the Demon Universe. So I thought I would introduce a Det character, and then we would come back the next week and introduce Jonathon. And I'm very excited to introduce Jonathon because honestly, he is just the biggest ray of sunshine. He is my darling. So, let's get into it. Jonathon Crane was born to a fairly poor family. His family wasn't super well off. And eventually his father and mother ended up having a really horrible argument and set of arguments, and it was revealed that not only was he planning on leaving, but he already had lined out the woman he was going to leave with, which is ultimately good for Crane and his mother because his father was a very emotionally manipulative person. He wasn't a good person, and while it was hard for Crane's mother to recognize what her husband was because she was never really informed about emotional abuse, she always thought that the only way it could be abusive would be if you were physically harmed. So she never really realized how awful he was. And then he said he was sick of her, he was bored of her, he had found another woman, and he wanted to leave. And perhaps most devastatingly to his son, he didn't really want Jonathon to come with him. Now, I will note that Jonathon goes by Crane as a symbol of pride. It's his mother's maiden name. And he once he got old enough to realize what his father was, he kind of denounced his father and his way of seeing the world. And he decided he would not only take his mother's name fully, but he would kind of tell people to call him that as a reminder that he never has to put up with anything less than what he deserves. And it's one of his best character traits for me that he is so confident and he will stand up for what he believes in. And he's truly one of my more optimistic characters. Shortly after his father leaves, the family is forced to move homes because they just can't support themselves. Crane's mother tries really hard to get a job. She tries everything to find a job that works, but she didn't go to college. She barely has a good standing. Like, she has her high school diploma, but she didn't get good grades, and she only barely squeezed by in high school. So whenever she tries to apply to a job, the only jobs that she can get are very low-paying jobs that take a lot of a toll on her health. Because she is not the most healthy woman. She's not dying by any stretch of the imagination. She's just got a lot of health problems that mean that she deals with a lot of chronic pain. And she found that she was overwhelmed and stressed, and she decided that every once in a while she would have a little glass of red wine to take the edge off, and that on its own isn't a bad thing. But once she realized that the little glass of red wine really helped her relax, it became habitual that she would have a little glass of red wine whenever she needed to relax. But eventually, one glass wasn't enough, so she would do 2, and eventually that wasn't enough, so she would do 3. And it was this very unintentional and sort of accidental, if you will, fall into alcoholism, and she never really realized what she was doing. For her, it was always just this one time, and she never realized that she had a problem. And at first, Crane was kind of too young to understand why his mother was acting differently. He knew that something was different. He noticed that she was different, but he still didn't really understand how. He had no idea that his mother was drinking at all. She never had any alcohol around him, very intentionally, because she didn't want to be a bad influence. So whenever she was drunk, he just sort of thought she was acting strange. It wasn't until he got into middle school, roughly, that people started kind of pointing out to him that his mom was acting like she was drunk. And some people were rather mean about it, but Crane never took it to heart. As I said, he is the kind of person who stands up for himself and what he believes in, and when people were cruel to him, he stood up to them and stopped letting people's harsh opinions get to him. Of course, that only goes so far. That mindset can't prevent you from being hurt entirely, but it did enough to keep him sort of above water, you know? But the more people talked about how his mom acted like she was drunk, the more he sort of started to piece together that must be what's actually happening. So he goes to one of his teachers, explains what he thinks is going on, and explains that he wants to help his mother. Of course, this gets kind of complicated because Child Protective Services get involved, and he is taken away from his mother for a time. Now, his father is gone. He doesn't respond to any of their requests for taking in his child. He pretty much says he wants nothing to do with the child, which, aside from being generally awful, is kind of for the best. Crane doesn't want to go be with his father either. Well, he has no surviving grandparents or aunts or uncles who can take him in, so for however long he's put into foster care. In the meantime, his mother kind of realizes exactly what's going on, and she realizes she has a problem, and she desperately wants to get her son back. She wants nothing more than to fix things and set things right. So what she does is she enters into rehab, she gets a psychologist, and even though she can't fully afford it, she does everything she possibly can. She takes out loans, takes out second mortgages to make sure that she will be healthy enough to be a worthy mother. And in doing so, she gets a sponsor, an AA sponsor. And this guy is really kind, he's really empathetic, he's someone who's been there. He understands, and he wants to help. So he helps her get back on her feet, and she starts coming to terms with some of her issues, all the while Crane is living in the foster care system. It's not ideal, but he's placed with a family that's fairly good, and even though he doesn't like it even a little bit, and it's a really hard time in his life, he's more than willing to forgive his mother. Because his mother is the only person who's ever really shown him what love is, in his eyes at least. And so when his mother is sober and when the courts decide that, yes, she can have her son back, he goes home. Now, when he goes home, they're still pretty impoverished. So what they decide to do is go back to college, and she applies for as many scholarships as she can, and eventually, barely scraping by, manages to get herself a couple of classes in a community college. Now, this is what she's doing throughout the remainder of Crane's time in middle school and some of his time in high school. She's getting what she can of her education and fighting to stay sober the entire time. For the most part, aside from small slip-ups, she succeeds in staying sober, and her son is never taken again. She's a good mother, and she really does want to be sober. Now that she knows she has a problem, she also knows that she has the materials and the tools to help herself. So, as horrible a situation as it is, they come out of it a much stronger pair. And eventually, her newfound college education helps her get a better job. Problem, or I guess not problem, is that the job happens to be in New York City. So they hop a plane, move themselves to New York, and she finds a new sponsor who helps her pay for her apartment in the first couple of months, so that she can be close to her sponsor and so that Crane can be in a good school district. He's a really nice guy, and his family is more than happy to accept sort of these two stragglers as one of their own. Crane ends up building a close friendship with their daughter, Caroline, and it's a really just sweet story. It comes from hard places and tough times in life. But Crane has always been something of a miracle for his mother. That's one of the things she always liked to say about him. No matter what strange things happened around him, because strange things did happen around him, usually they were very positive. One of Crane's strangest memories is from the time in elementary school where a bunch of kids were gathered around because they saw a very badly injured dog. The dog was as good as dead, and when Crane wandered over and settled next to the dog, just petting it was enough for the dog to perk its head up and survive long enough for help to get there. The dog would survive. It was strange. The dog had virtually no chance of survival, but it did. That happened several other times with other small animals. Stray cats, birds, raccoons, you name it. Anything that got injured around Crane was just somehow always okay. The child was never really around tragedy in terms of death. His tragedies came more from people. But even then, he always found a way of talking to people and expressing himself through people, and always had an incredibly positive energy. People felt drawn to him and comforted by him. But things were still not always exactly great. Sometimes, especially as he got older, when he would deal with anxiety or any sort of fear, when his body started to sort of change and when he started to have strange nightmares, he would find that the lights in his room were all blown out. He would plug in new lights and the power would go out. Just strange things started to happen where the lights would flicker and burst as though somehow they had just all of a sudden combusted. And he was starting to be a little afraid and unsure, and decided to confide these worries in Caroline. It's at this point that he runs across Crow. So, fun fact for you guys, their names are Crow and Crane, at least the names they go by, and it took me far too long to realize those are both birds. What does that say about these characters? Don't know, you tell me. I haven't actually looked into the symbolism of the crane, so if you guys want to hit me up with some crane symbolism, I would be more than happy to read through in the comments, because I'm curious what I have made this character represent. But if it's not good, well, I mean, the name is set in stone, the name ain't going anywhere. So that's all I can really tell you without getting into plot, but this is one of my more neutral character backstories. Like, yes, it's riddled with some sadness, and it has its tinges of darkness. For instance, being taken by CPS from your alcoholic mother. It's ultimately laced with optimism, and that is a huge aspect of this character. He is just sort of surrounded by happy and surrounded by good. He is very much the opposite of Crow, who is surrounded by death and sadness and all things unfortunate. So the curiosity, one of the aspects of the story is how someone surrounded by light and someone surrounded by shadow interact with each other and how their lives affect each other. And that's one of the key elements of the story, because most of my stories have the characters at the center. That is the way I like to design my plot lines and my story arcs, based around how do these people affect each other. I am a psych major, so psychology is very important to me, and the way that people interact is fascinating to me. So I hope that you enjoyed this one. It's a little bit more on the tame side. I think for next week I'm going to introduce another debt character, because you guys really seem to want to know more about that. And I mean, I've already introduced the universe, so why not? Alright, so that said, have a good morning, evening, afternoon, nighttime, time of day, and I will catch you guys in the next video. If you're subscribed, which you should be, and you should also turn on my post notifications because that lets you know when I post more videos. You should go and follow me on Instagram if you want to see more of my polls and stories. You can also go follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, though admittedly I'm not as active on those as I should be. So maybe if I get more people telling me, hey, you need to post on these more often, I will do it. So, you know, your incentive is my incentive. That's how this works. Alright guys, that's it for this video, and I will catch you guys in the next one.